My name is Claire, and I never imagined that the darkest moment of my life would also become the beginning of my strength. The sound of autumn leaves cracking beneath my shoes is still burned into my memory. I stood behind my mother's kitchen window that evening, frozen in disbelief, holding my 11-year-old son's hand so tightly I thought I might break it. Tyler's little fingers squeezed mine, back his eyes, wide, with confusion. But it was nothing compared to the storm ripping through my chest. Through that thin pane of glass, I heard the two people I trusted most in this world destroy every illusion I had ever held about love, loyalty, and family. "She's so broken, Helen. Always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore." It was Brandon's voice, my husband, the man I believed would stand by me until the end. And then came the sound of my mother's laugh, sharp, cruel, like a knife dragged against stone. "I told you not to marry her. I warned you. She's too weak for a man like you. Too damaged." Each word landed like a blow. My knees nearly buckled. My pulse hammered in my ears. I pressed my finger to my lips, silently begging Tyler to stay quiet, even as his eyes searched my face for answers. He knew something was horribly wrong, even if he could not understand the full weight of it. Then Brandon spoke again, casual, cold, as if he were discussing the weather. The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while. But now that it's nearly gone, I'm finished pretending to be the caring husband to someone so pathetic. The insurance money, my father's legacy, the funds I believed we had saved for Tyler's college and our future. And here was my husband revealing it had been nothing more than bait to him. My vision blurred, rage and disbelief swirling until I had to grip the windowsill to keep from falling. My mother's response made my blood freeze. "So what are you going to do about it?" There was excitement in her tone, like she was thrilled by the destruction of her own daughter. Brandon's reply shattered what was left of my heart. "I'm going to leave her. Take everything. She's so weak she won't fight me. She'll just cry and accept it like she always does." And they laughed, together, laughing at my pain, laughing at the woman who had spent her life begging for scraps of their approval. Something inside me broke at that moment, but it didn't shatter into useless pieces. It cracked open and revealed something else, something I had never believed lived inside me, cold, calculated, dangerous. I looked down at Tyler, my sweet boy, who deserved so much better than this nightmare. He gripped my hand tighter silently, asking if everything would be okay. I whispered the only promise I could make in that moment, not with words, but with the steel forming in my heart. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I pulled Tyler away from the window and led him back to the car in silence. My mind was already racing, spinning with ideas and possibilities. Betrayal this deep did not deserve tears. It demanded strategy. When we drove away from that house, the golden leaves swirling in the rearview mirror, I knew nothing would ever be the same. That was the night I buried the old Claire, the timid daughter, the grateful wife, the woman who thought she was lucky to be tolerated. From her ashes, someone new was born, a woman with nothing left to lose. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she is the most dangerous person you could ever underestimate. Before I continue this story, let me pause for a moment, because I know many of you are watching from different corners of the world. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love knowing where my global family is gathered. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. That's how you'll never miss the moments where betrayal turns into power and weakness transforms into strength. Now, let me take you back 3 months earlier when I still believed my life was perfect. The truth did not hit me all at once. It seeped in slowly, like poison curling through my veins with every word I had overheard that night. My husband's voice, my mother's laugh, their plan to rip my life apart. I drove away with Tyler in silence, but inside my chest, something hollowed out and left only fire. For years I had believed Brandon loved me. I thought his rough hands, calloused from running his construction company, were the same hands that had chosen to hold me through the worst of times. I thought my mother Helen, even with her sharp tongue, still wanted what was best for me. But now, standing in the wreckage of those beliefs, I saw the truth. They had been playing me like a fool. I sat at the kitchen table long after Tyler had gone to bed that night. The ticking of the clock was deafening. Their words echoed in my head. "She's weak, pathetic, too damaged." Every insult tore through me, but beneath the hurt came something unexpected clarity. I realized Brandon had never truly loved me. He loved the money my father left when he died in that car accident 3 years ago. $100,000 in life insurance. Funds we promised each other would be untouched until Tyler's college years. But now it was nearly gone. And so was his act. And my own mother, had been feeding him the script. She had been training me my entire life to feel small, to believe I didn't deserve better, so that when this day came, I would sit quietly and let them strip me of everything. I remember staring at my reflection in the dark window, whispering out loud, "Never again." The next morning, Brandon walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead and poured me coffee. His smile was practiced warm, the smile of the man I had fallen in love with 12 years ago. For a brief second, I almost believed him again. Almost. But I knew better now. Behind that smile was a man who had already decided my fate. "Morning, beautiful," he said. "I might be late tonight. Big job starting this week." His lies were smooth, his voice steady. But all I heard was the sentence he had whispered to my mother the night before I'm going to leave her. "Take everything." I forced myself to nod and smile, playing the role of the clueless wife. Inside, I memorized every detail, the shift of his eyes, the way his hand tightened on the coffee mug. I would need those memories later when I built my case. Tyler wandered in with his messy hair and sleepy eyes. "Morning, Mom. Morning, Dad." He grabbed toast and laughed when Brandon ruffled his hair. That laughter almost broke me. Tyler had no idea his father was planning to abandon him as easily as his mother. He deserved better. That thought carried me through the day, even as I went to work at the library, pretending life was ordinary. My boss asked how I was. My coworkers talked about their weekends. I nodded, smiled, answered with words that meant nothing. Underneath, I was screaming. By evening, Brandon returned late, his clothes dusted with dirt that I now knew had been staged. His hug was quick, his kiss shallow. I held on anyway, not because I loved him anymore, but because I wanted him to keep believing I was still the same fragile woman he thought I was. Inside, however, I was already making lists. I knew I had to gather proof. I knew I had to act like nothing had changed. And most importantly, I knew I could not let them see me fight back, not yet. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, his even breaths lulling him to sleep, I whispered into the dark, "You think I won't fight, but I will. And when I do, you'll regret ever underestimating me." Before I move on, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who should have loved you most? Tell me in the comments how you handled it. Sharing your story could help someone else who feels alone tonight. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe so you never miss these powerful stories of betrayal and survival. Because trust me, this was only the beginning. I remember the exact moment something inside me shifted. It was not the kind of break that leaves you shattered lying helpless on the ground. It was sharper, cleaner, like a rope snapping free after years of being pulled too tight. For most of my 32 years, I had lived believing I was weak. My mother told me so every chance she had. Brandon, in his quiet way, reinforced it, making decisions without me handling the finances, soothing me with half-truths when I asked too many questions. I had accepted that role, the fragile daughter, the grateful wife, the woman who should be thankful anyone loved her at all. But as I lay awake that night beside Brandon, listening to his steady breathing, a different truth crystallized. I was done being the victim in my own life. His betrayal had cut so deep that the part of me still capable of blind trust had died. What rose from those ashes was someone new, someone I barely recognized, but instantly trusted more than I had ever trusted myself. Cold, calculated, determined. I no longer saw myself as the girl desperate for approval. I saw myself as a strategist. If they thought I would collapse into tears and surrender, they had already lost. Because nothing is more dangerous than a woman who has nothing left to lose. The next morning I put on the mask they expected. I tied my hair back in the same plain ponytail, wore the same modest clothes Brandon said he liked, cooked breakfast like every other day. I smiled when Tyler told me about his history project and kissed Brandon goodbye at the door. To them, it was another ordinary morning. But behind my calm eyes, wheels were turning. I replayed every detail of the conversation I had overheard at my mother's house. I memorized the words. I studied their tone. And I made myself a silent promise I would collect proof, I would bide my time, and when the moment came, I would strike with precision. That day at the library, I felt the transformation even more. Normally, I kept my head down. I avoided conflict. But when a coworker made a snide remark about my tired look, I didn't shrink. I smiled, politely nodded, and filed away the observation. People underestimated me everywhere. They always had. That would become my greatest advantage. That evening, Brandon came home late again. He kissed my cheek, muttered about long hours, and disappeared into the shower. I poured him a glass of wine, handed it over with the same gentle smile, and said nothing about the ache building inside me. Outwardly, I was the same old Rebecca. Inwardly, I was sharpening a blade. Later that night, as Tyler slept and Brandon scrolled through his phone beside me, I whispered into the darkness of my mind, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." For the first time in my life, I did not feel powerless. I felt dangerous. And with that realization came a rush of energy I had never known before. Plans began to form, quiet, precise, a roadmap leading me out of the cage they had built around me since childhood. I was no longer the woman who begged for crumbs of affection. I was the woman who would burn the table down if necessary. And here's where I want to pause and invite you in. If you were standing in my shoes, betrayed by both your spouse and your own parent, what would you do first? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and you never know, your insight could help someone else find their way through betrayal. Because trust me, the story you've heard so far is only the spark. The firestorm was still to come. 3 months earlier, if you had asked me, I would have told you I had the perfect life. Or at least as perfect as it could be for someone like me. My name is Claire, and back then, I still believed in happy endings. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. Brandon and I had bought it when Tyler was just 2 years old. I imagined we would grow old there, watching our boy turn into a man, filling the rooms with memories. That house was more than walls and windows to me. It was the symbol of everything I thought I had achieved, despite my mother's constant reminders that I would never be enough. Brandon was the kind of man who drew attention wherever he went. He ran a small construction company, and people in our town respected him. Men liked being around him, women found him attractive, and I always wondered why he had chosen me. He had those steady blue eyes and that easy charm. I still remember how my heart fluttered the first time he called me beautiful. Even after 12 years together, I would flush like a schoolgirl whenever he said it. Our mornings were simple, but precious. Brandon would always be up before me, dressed in his work uniform, smelling faintly of soap and coffee. He would pour my cup and leave the cream on the counter just the way I liked it. "Morning, beautiful," he'd whisper, brushing a kiss across my forehead. My heart believed those gestures meant love. Looking back, I realized they were habits, acts performed by a man skilled in keeping up appearances. Tyler was the center of my universe. At 11 years old, he was all legs and energy, his hair always sticking up like he had just rolled out of bed. He'd grab toast on the way out the door, laughing when Brandon teased him. I remember standing there in my robe, coffee in hand, watching them, thinking, "This is my family. This is my everything." Without them, I was nothing. At least that was what I believed. My job at the library grounded me. I worked part-time shelving books, helping students find research, watching children discover new stories. The library was my sanctuary. Growing up with a mother who never spared me a kind word, books were the only place I learned that other worlds existed. At the library, I felt useful, even valued. Mrs. Maverick, my supervisor, often told me I had a gift for helping people. Her kindness reminded me of the grandmother I never had. On the surface, life was ordinary, comfortable, the kind of life many would envy. Brandon worked long hours, but I told myself that was just how construction was demanding, unpredictable. I never questioned the late nights. I never asked about the fatigue in his eyes, or the way he sometimes flinched, when I mentioned visiting my mother. I was too busy being grateful that he and Helen seemed to get along. After all, wasn't that every woman's dream? A husband who respected her mother. But even in those moments of happiness, there were shadows. I pushed them aside. The flicker in Brandon's eyes when I mentioned Mom calling. The tension in his jaw that lasted only a heartbeat. The way she always seemed to know details about his projects before I did. I ignored those signs. Love makes you blind. Or maybe I wanted to be blind because facing the truth would mean admitting the foundation of my world was already cracking. If I had looked closer, I might have seen it then, the cracks spreading beneath the surface. I might have noticed how often Brandon angled his phone away from me, or how his shirt smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I might have caught the way my mother's voice lit up when she asked about him before asking about me. But I didn't. I chose the comfort of my illusions. I believed I was safe in my little bubble of family library books and quiet evenings. How wrong I was. And let me pause right here. If you've ever looked back at a time when you thought life was perfect, only to realize it was a lie, you know the sting. Share in the comments if you've ever ignored the warning signs, because someone watching this right now may need to hear your story. And if you're not already part of this community, hit that subscribe button. Stay with us, because the cracks in my perfect life were about to split wide open. It started with whispers, small things, fleeting moments that most people would dismiss. But looking back, those whispers were the beginning of the storm. I was at the library one quiet Tuesday morning stacking picture books in the children's section. That was when I overheard my coworker Janet speaking at the front desk. Her voice carried easily through the rows of shelves. "I saw Brandon Miller at the diner yesterday around noon," she said casually. "He was with Helen Lakin. Looked pretty cozy if you ask me." Helen, my mother. My hands froze around the book I was holding. Heat spread across my chest, though my body felt suddenly cold. Mrs. Maverick sounded surprised. "Really, I didn't know they knew each other that well." Janet chuckled knowingly. "Oh, they seem to know each other very well." The words echoed in my head like a bell that would not stop ringing. Brandon and my mother. Lunch together. Cozy. What could possibly explain that I told myself there had to be an innocent reason? Maybe they ran into each other by chance. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe... But deep down I knew. A chill settled in my stomach that I could not shake. That evening, Brandon came home late again. His clothes were dusty, his smile tired. He kissed my cheek quickly before heading for the shower. "Long day," he muttered. "The Jackson renovation is killing me." But when I looked out the window, his truck was spotless. Not a speck of dirt, not a trace of construction dust. For a man who had supposedly been at a job site all day, he looked far too clean. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to shout, to demand the truth. But instead, I swallowed my doubts and nodded like the supportive wife I was supposed to be. "Dinner's almost ready," I said softly, as if nothing was wrong. For the next few weeks, the signs multiplied. Brandon's phone was always with him, even in the bathroom. He angled the screen away when I was near. He changed his passcode, something he had never done before. At first, I told myself it was just business, but the lies piled up. I noticed how distracted he seemed during conversations, how he would drift away in thought when Tyler told him about school. And then there was my mother, her voice on the phone, always asking about Brandon first, as if I were only a side note in her world. "How's Brandon handling that big project?" she would ask. Yet I had never told her about any project. The connections formed like puzzle pieces sliding into place. But every time I considered confronting them, fear held me back. Fear of being wrong. Fear of what would happen if I was right. One Thursday afternoon, Tyler came home from school with bright eyes. "Mom, can we visit Grandma Helen? It's been a while." I hesitated. I had tried calling her earlier, but both her landline and cell phone had gone straight to voicemail. Something about it unsettled me. "Maybe another day, sweetheart. We should call first." But Tyler pouted. "Please, just to see if she's home." Against my better judgment, I agreed. 20 minutes later, we turned onto my mother's street. My heart stopped. Brandon's truck was parked in her driveway. For a moment, I could not breathe. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Tyler looked up from his handheld game. Isn't that Dad's truck? Yes, I whispered, it is. I told him we would wait. We would figure out what was happening. But in my heart, I already knew. The whispers had become a roar. The truth was standing there in plain sight, and I could no longer look away. Before I reveal what happened when we walked closer to that house, let me ask you, have you ever ignored the warning signs, hoping you were wrong, only to find out you were right all along? Tell me in the comments. And if you're watching this and haven't yet joined our community, now is the time. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the twists that come next. Because trust me, what I heard through that window would change everything. The mind has a way of whispering truths long before the heart is ready to hear them. My instincts had begun to scream at me louder and louder, and though I tried to silence them, I could not ignore what was right in front of me. It wasn't just the late nights or the secretive phone calls anymore. It was the way my mother seemed to know too much about Brandon's work details I had never shared with her. One Sunday afternoon, I called her just to check in. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "How are you?" "Oh, I'm fine, Rebecca," she replied, then almost too quickly. "How's Brandon handling that permit issue with the city?" I froze. Permit issue, I hadn't told her anything about that. In fact, Brandon hadn't mentioned it to me either. He's dealing with it? I said, carefully testing her tone. "Oh, I'm sure he is," she answered lightly, like she knew exactly what was going on. I hung up the phone, staring at the wall in silence. How could she possibly know something I didn't? Was she talking to him behind my back? The thought made my stomach turn. Later that evening, when Brandon returned home, I asked casually, "Did you ever get that permit problem sorted out?" His fork froze halfway to his mouth. For just a second, I saw panic flicker in his eyes. Then it was gone. "Yeah," he said smoothly. "Finally got it handled." "Where'd you hear about that?" I forced a smile. "Oh, you must have mentioned it before." But inside dread curled around my ribs. He hadn't told me. My mother had. And the only way she could know was if he had told her directly. The pieces of the puzzle were falling together, and though I wanted desperately to deny it, the picture was becoming clear. Over the next week, I started noticing even more. My mother asked about Brandon first every single time we spoke. "How's Brandon doing with that renovation? Has Brandon gotten more clients lately?" Her questions were never about me, rarely about Tyler, always about him. At first I told myself it was because she liked him, that she thought he was more capable than I was. But then why did her voice always soften when she said his name? Why did it feel intimate? One night I woke up around midnight. The bed beside me was empty. Panic shot through me until I heard his voice downstairs, muffled but distinct. I crept halfway down the stairs, heart hammering. "Yes, Helen," he whispered. "I'll take care of it. She suspects nothing." I nearly lost my balance on the steps. Helen, my mother. I hurried back to bed before he could catch me listening. I lay awake until dawn, my heart pounding, my mind racing. He was talking to her in the middle of the night, about me, about plans. I wanted to scream to demand answers, but something inside told me not yet. Not until I knew everything. So I stayed quiet. I watched, I listened, and I gathered the evidence in my mind. Each lie, each late night, each question from my mother became a thread. And those threads began weaving a rope strong enough to pull me out of the pit they thought they had trapped me in. I had no proof yet, but my instincts were no longer whispers. They were alarms. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that the two people I trusted most were hiding something terrible. The question was, how much longer could I play the fool before the truth ripped through the surface completely? Before we move forward, let me ask you, have you ever felt your instincts screaming at you while everyone around you told you to ignore them? Did you trust that inner voice, or did you push it down? Tell me in the comments, and if you're finding this story gripping, don't forget to subscribe. Stay with me because the moment of truth was only steps away. What I discovered next would leave no room for doubt. That Thursday began like any other. Tyler had a half day at school, so I planned to spend the afternoon with him. We sat at the kitchen table eating grilled cheese sandwiches, his legs swinging under the chair. "Can we visit Grandma Helen?" he asked with innocent eagerness. "It's been a while." I hesitated. I had already tried calling my mother earlier, but both her home phone and her cell had gone straight to voicemail. My stomach churned. Something was off. "Maybe another day, sweetheart. We should call first." But Tyler's eyes lit up. We could just drive by and see if she's home. Please, Mom? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We climbed into the car, and 20 minutes later, we turned onto the street where I had grown up. The trees lining the block were bursting with autumn color, red and gold leaves fluttering to the ground. It should have been beautiful. Instead, my blood ran cold. Brandon's truck was parked in my mother's driveway. For a moment, I could not breathe. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Tyler looked up from his game, puzzled. "Isn't that Dad's truck?" "Yes," I managed to whisper. "It is." I pulled the car to the curb across the street. My heart was racing. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was helping her with repairs. Maybe she needed something heavy moved. But my instincts screamed otherwise. "Are we going in?" Tyler asked. "In a minute," I said. "Let's just wait." But waiting wasn't enough. A force stronger than fear pushed me forward. I led Tyler around to the backyard, to the same kitchen window I had stood beneath as a child. That window had been the backdrop of my life, watching my mother cook, listening to her voice drift into the garden. Now it became the stage for my undoing. Inside I heard Brandon's voice, cold, sharp. "She's so broken, Helen. Always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore." My mother's laugh followed, cruel and triumphant. "I told you not to marry her. I always said she was too weak for you, too damaged." The words hit me like stones. My legs trembled. My son squeezed my hand, sensing my distress, though not fully understanding. Brandon's voice cut again, casual, as if discussing the weather. "The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while. But now it's nearly gone. I'm done pretending to be the caring husband to someone so pathetic." The world tilted. The money I thought we had been saving for Tyler's college. My father's last gift. All of it used as bait in their twisted scheme. Then my mother's voice, eager. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to leave her," Brandon answered. "Take everything. She's too weak to fight back. She'll just cry and accept it like always." And then they laughed. Together, laughing at me, laughing at the life I thought was mine. I felt something inside me snap, not like glass shattering, but like a rope breaking free. My father had been a kind man, teaching me to love books and believe I was worthy. My mother had spent decades tearing that belief down, and Brandon had sealed the lie by choosing me only for money. But now I knew, and knowledge is power. I pulled Tyler away from the window, my voice steady despite the quake inside me. "Come on, sweetheart, we're going home." "Don't we need to say hi to Dad?" he asked. "Dad's busy helping Grandma," I lied softly. "We'll see him later." As we drove away, the leaves swirled in the rearview mirror like burning embers. In that moment, I buried the old me, the grateful wife, the desperate daughter. From her ashes, a new woman rose. One who would not cry. One who would fight. If you were standing outside that window with me hearing your husband and your own mother plotting against you, what would you do? Would you storm inside or walk away and plan your revenge? Tell me in the comments. And if this story has you gripping your seat, don't forget to subscribe, so you'll see exactly how I turned betrayal into power. Because trust me, this was only the beginning of their downfall. That night after Tyler had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the dim glow of a lamp. My hands shook as I opened the filing cabinet Brandon usually controlled. For years, he had told me I was too emotional to handle finances, that I should just let him manage everything. I had believed him. Now I knew the truth. He wanted me blind. Inside the cabinet were bank statements, insurance documents, and receipts carefully stacked. My breath caught as I scanned line after line. The life insurance payout from my father's death money meant for Tyler's college was nearly gone. $50,000 had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. 30,000 more withdrawn in cash over the last 6 months. Another 20,000 listed under home improvements that had never happened. 15,000 supposedly for construction equipment Brandon never purchased. And scattered smaller withdrawals I couldn't explain. The pit in my stomach widened into rage. My father's final gift had been siphoned away piece by piece. Brandon had not only stolen from me, he had stolen from our son. As I flipped through more records, one paper made my blood run cold. A refinancing document for our house. My name signed neatly at the bottom. Only, I had never signed it. My signature had been forged. My hands trembled as I traced the letters. Brandon had gone further than lies. He had committed crimes, and my mother Helen was woven into it all. Phone records showed dozens of calls between them, sometimes at the exact hours Brandon had told me he was working late. I sat there until dawn, piecing together every shred of evidence. Betrayal, theft, conspiracy. The people I loved most had conspired to gut my future and leave me hollow. But by the time the first sunlight filtered through the blinds, my tears were gone. I felt something else instead: certainty. I was not going to collapse. I was going to fight. The next morning, I acted as if nothing was wrong. I poured Brandon his coffee-kissed Tyler goodbye and smiled like the dutiful wife he believed me to be. But as soon as they left, I drove to the bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller, Janet," the head teller greeted warmly. "What can we do for you today?" "I need to review all of my accounts," I said, forcing calm into my voice. An hour later, the truth became undeniable. That mysterious account holding $50,000 was a joint account belonging to Brandon and my mother. The bank manager pointed to my signature authorizing the transfer. My stomach twisted. "If you don't remember signing this, perhaps you did it months ago," he said kindly. But I had never signed it. They had forged my name again. I smiled politely and lied. "Oh, I remember now. I just wanted to double-check." Inside, I was shaking with fury. I walked out of that bank knowing two things. One, Brandon and my mother had underestimated me. And two, I now had enough reason to fight back with everything I had. That evening when Brandon came home, I greeted him with dinner and laughter. I even wore the sweater he liked. He kissed my cheek, never realizing I had uncovered his crimes. But as I looked across the table at him, I saw only a stranger, a thief, a liar, a man who had gambled away his family for greed. And I made a vow right then he would never see me break. He would only see me win. What? Have you ever discovered something that made your blood run cold, like opening a door and realizing your whole life was a lie? Share your moment in the comments. And if you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because from here on, every move I made was part of a larger plan. What I set in motion next would seal both of their fates. The morning after my discovery, I woke up with a plan already forming in my mind. The fear that had once paralyzed me was gone. In its place, there was a calm clarity I had never felt before. If Brandon and my mother thought I was too weak to fight back, then their arrogance would become my greatest weapon. I started small. I called in sick to the library claiming a headache. In truth, I needed time to research, to prepare, to transform from the woman they believed I was into the woman who would destroy them both. On my laptop, I typed words I had never imagined myself searching: divorce lawyer, financial fraud, custody strategy. For hours, I read case studies, legal articles, state statutes. I learned how hidden bank accounts could be exposed in court, how a forged signature was not just betrayal, but a crime, how custody battles were won when one parent could prove the other had manipulated evidence. The more I read, the stronger I felt. Every paragraph was a brick laid in the fortress I was building around myself and my son. Then I researched something darker: fraud law, embezzlement, forgery. I discovered that moving funds into a secret account under false pretenses was still theft, even between spouses, if intent to deceive could be proven. Brandon had not just betrayed me, he had broken the law. And I was gathering proof that could put him behind bars. That afternoon, after picking up Tyler from school, we talked about his history project. He told me about the Revolutionary War, about colonists who pretended to be loyal to Britain while secretly plotting rebellion. His words struck me like lightning. That was me. On the outside, I would remain the obedient wife and daughter. On the inside, I was already in open revolt. That night, I cooked Brandon's favorite dinner pot roast with potatoes and carrots. I put on the red dress he had once called stunning. I smiled, laughed at his jokes, listened to him complain about work. "You seem happy tonight," he remarked, reaching for my hand. "I am happy," I lied smoothly. In a way, it wasn't a lie. For the first time in months, I had a purpose, a plan. As he chewed his meal, I said casually, "Maybe we should have my mother over for dinner this weekend. It's been too long since we all sat down together." Something flickered in his eyes, but he recovered quickly. "That sounds great, sweetheart. I'm sure Helen would love that." Helen. Not your mom, not your mother. Just Helen, like she was his partner, not mine. I smiled as though nothing was strange. Inside, I was already plotting. After he went to bed, I sat in the dark, laying out the phases of my war. Phase 1, gather information. That was nearly complete. Phase 2, prepare weapons documents, recordings proof. Phase 3, strike when they least expected it, ensuring they understood exactly what they had lost when they underestimated me. For the first time in years, I fell asleep smiling. The next morning, I called my mother with a carefully rehearsed voice. "Mom," I said, sounding small and unsure, "would you like to come over Saturday for dinner?" Her tone carried smug satisfaction. "Oh, that sounds lovely, dear. Is everything all right? You sound down." "I'm fine," I replied softly. "Maybe just a little tired. Brandon's been working so much." "Well, men work hard to provide. You should be grateful instead of needy." Her words once pierced me. Now they only fueled the fire in my chest. "You're right, Mom. I'll see you Saturday." When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. For years, I had played the role they cast for me, the weak, grateful daughter, the needy wife. But now I wore that role like a mask, knowing that underneath, I was someone they would never see coming. And here's where I'll open a loop for you if you think things are bad. Now wait until you hear what I uncovered next. Do you think I should confront them directly or keep building my case in secret? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because the twist that came next changed everything. Saturday night arrived, and with it, the chance to set my trap. I had spent the day cleaning, cooking, and smiling, hiding the storm raging inside me. On the surface, it looked like any other family dinner. But beneath every detail was part of my plan. The roast simmered in the oven. The table was set with my best dishes, the ones we rarely used. Brandon came home right on time, kissed my cheek, and complimented me on the meal. "You look nice," he said, his eyes lingering just a little too long. "Thank you," I answered sweetly, wearing an old sweater and slacks, nothing to reveal the fire building inside me. I wanted him to believe I was still the same woman he thought he could destroy. At 6 o'clock sharp, my mother walked through the door. She looked immaculate as always, in a silk blouse and expensive heels, carrying a bottle of wine. She kissed my cheek with a smile that felt like poison. "Rebecca, darling, you look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" The first strike, always disguised as concern. I smiled tightly. "I'm fine, Mom, just busy with work and Tyler." "Well, you know what they say," she laughed, handing the wine to Brandon. "A woman's work is never done." The way she looked at him then made my skin crawl. Possessive, intimate, like he belonged to her. And Brandon's warm grin in return confirmed everything I already knew. We sat down to dinner. The conversation was torture. They exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. They shared inside jokes I wasn't part of. My mother asked Brandon, "Did you ever get that permit issue sorted out?" My blood went cold. She knew, again. Details he hadn't shared with me but had clearly told her. Brandon answered easily, "Yeah, finally handled. Thanks for asking." I forced a smile, playing the fool. "What permit issue?" I asked innocently. Brandon waved it off. "Just work stuff, nothing you need to worry about." But the way my mother nodded knowingly cut me deeper than any blade. After dinner, I excused myself to the kitchen to grab dessert. As I carried the pie back in, I heard their voices drop low. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, familiar, intimate, conspiratorial. When I walked back in, they sat apart, but the air between them was charged. "This looks delicious, sweetheart," Brandon said, forcing a smile. We ate in strained silence. My mother left around 9, hugging me again with false affection. "We should do this more often, dear," she said sweetly. "Of course," I replied. "Family is important." The lie slid from my tongue as easily as theirs did. Later, Brandon helped me wash dishes, humming under his breath like the perfect husband. "Your mother seemed to enjoy herself," he said. "She did," I answered softly, though. Inside, I wanted to scream. "I'm glad you two get along so well." He smiled, oblivious to the fact that I had already begun collecting evidence. My digital recorder had been running in my pocket all evening, capturing every slip of the tongue, every conspiratorial exchange. A small wireless camera hidden in the living room had recorded their body language. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. That night, lying in bed while Brandon slept, I stared at the ceiling with icy calm. They thought I was weak. They thought I would cry and surrender. But I had proof now, and I would gather more. They wanted to frame me as unstable to take my child and my future. They thought I would never see it coming, but I was already steps ahead, and I would make sure their downfall was absolute. So, what would you have done in my shoes that night? Confront them at the table, or keep playing the role until you had every piece of evidence? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear how you'd handle it, because the decision to stay silent became the sharpest weapon in my arsenal. Because the real proof, the evidence that would bury them, was still to come. The following week, Brandon made his usual excuse. "The Jackson job is running behind," he said at breakfast, sipping his coffee. "I'll be late most nights this week." He kissed the top of my head, grabbed his lunch, and walked out the door like a man with nothing to hide. But I knew better. The Jackson job had been finished for weeks. I had driven past it myself. The family was already moving in. There was no delay, no late hours, only lies. I needed time, and I needed them to think they still held the upper hand. So I came up with a lie of my own, one designed to hook them deeper into my trap. That Friday evening, I made Brandon's favorite dinner again. I slipped into the black dress I had bought but hidden away. I painted my eyes, added a touch of lipstick, and greeted him at the door with a smile he hadn't seen in years. He paused, stunned. "Wow. You look amazing. What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to look nice for my husband?" I asked sweetly, setting down the roast on the table. Throughout dinner, I played the perfect wife, laughing at his jokes, asking about his day, refilling his glass of wine. Then when the moment was right, I leaned in and delivered my lie. I was thinking, I said casually as though it meant nothing. "Maybe we should plan a vacation for Christmas. Tyler's never seen the ocean, and money won't be a problem. I spoke with my dad's insurance company today, and they said there might be additional benefits. Something about compound interest from delayed payouts." Brandon froze mid-bite. "Really?" he asked carefully. They weren't sure of the amount yet. I continued smoothly, "But it could be another 50,000, maybe more. They'll call me next week." I watched the storm cross his face, surprise, greed, calculation, and finally fear. He masked it quickly, forcing a smile. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart. Really wonderful." But I had seen it, the flicker of panic, the sudden shift in his eyes. I had just bought myself more time, because now instead of leaving me right away, he would stall. He would wait for money that did not exist, and while he waited, I would finish building the case that would ruin him. That night after Brandon fell asleep, I lay awake listening. Around 2 a.m, I heard him slip out of bed. Quiet as a shadow, I followed him to the top of the stairs. From the kitchen, I heard his low voice on the phone. "Helen, it's me. We have a problem. She says there's more insurance money coming. Another 50 grand. No, I don't think she suspects anything. She's too stupid to put it together, but we might have to wait longer." My recorder was in my hand, already running. Every word captured. Proof. I crept back upstairs before he could catch me, my heart pounding but steady. They thought I was the fool. They thought they were in control. But I had just turned their greed into my advantage. For the next 2 weeks, I wore the mask of the old me. I laughed at his stories. I cooked his favorite meals. I called my mother with fake cheerfulness. And all the while, I met with lawyers, investigators, and bank fraud specialists. I was building a case so airtight it would crush them both. But to Brandon and Helen, I was still the weak woman they could manipulate. And that illusion was the deadliest weapon I had. If you were me, would you have dangled that bait, risking them staying longer just to give yourself more time? Or would you have struck immediately? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because what came next was the evidence that would finally bury them. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Brandon claimed once again that he would be working late, repeating the same tired excuse about the Jackson job. I kissed him goodbye at breakfast, packed Tyler's lunch, and waved like the devoted wife I pretended to be. But inside, my pulse raced. That evening, after Tyler was asleep, I slipped out with my recorder and a small camera the private investigator had given me. I parked 2 blocks away from my mother's house and walked quietly through the shadows. Brandon's truck was already in her driveway. My mother's car sat beside it. I crouched behind the hedge near the kitchen window, the same window where my childhood ended, and waited. Their voices drifted out clear as day. "When are you going to tell her?" My mother's voice, sharp and patient. After Christmas, Brandon replied, I promised Tyler a good holiday. I don't want to ruin it for him. You're too soft, she sneered. That woman doesn't deserve consideration. She's been a disappointment since the day she was born. My stomach turned, but I stayed still, pressing the recorder tighter in my palm. Brandon sighed. Look, Helen, I know you're eager, but I have to think about my son. Your son will be better off without her dragging him down, she said coldly. Then came the words that sliced through me like a blade. Sometimes I think about what our life could have been if I had chosen you from the beginning instead of settling for her. My mother's laugh was low satisfied. Better late than never, darling. Once you're free of her, we can finally be together the way we should have been all along. The world spun. This wasn't just betrayal for money. This wasn't just conspiracy. It was an affair, my husband and my mother. I nearly gasped out loud, but I forced myself silent. They had just handed me the weapon I needed. Have you figured out how to get the rest of the money? My mother pressed. Most of it's already in our account, Brandon admitted. She signs whatever I put in front of her. I've even been forging her signature on refinancing documents. By the time I file for divorce, there won't be anything left for her to fight over. What about Tyler? I'll get custody. Who would give a child to a woman with a history of depression and instability? By the time my lawyer is finished, she'll look like a wreck. I froze. Depression, instability. That was the trap. Brandon had been pushing me to see a therapist, encouraging me to document my struggles. He'd been turning my tears, my moments of doubt, into evidence. He was building a case to take my son. I recorded it all. 20 full minutes of their plan to ruin me, their laughter, their promises of a life together, their plot to strip me of everything. By the time I crept away into the night, my heart was no longer broken. It was stone. I had enough evidence to bury them both. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. First to a divorce lawyer in the next town, someone sharp, unconnected to our small community. Her name was Daisy Walsh, and she listened quietly as I explained the situation. We can build this case, she said firmly, but you must stay quiet until we're ready. Second to a private investigator recommended by Daisy, a man who specialized in adultery and financial crimes. And third to the bank's fraud department. I believe my husband has been forging my signature on financial documents, I said calmly. I need to prove it. By Thursday, I had a paper trail of fraud photographs of Brandon's truck parked in my mother's driveway and audio recordings that exposed everything. Daisy even arranged a freeze on our accounts, ready to activate the moment I filed for divorce. But I wasn't ready yet. No, I wanted them deeper in the hole. I wanted them confident, arrogant, certain of their victory. Because when I struck, I wanted them to fall so far they'd never recover. That night, as I watched Brandon across the dinner table, his smile easy, his eyes full of lies, I realized something. He thought he was winning. He had no idea I was already holding the knife. What? And here's where I'll leave you with a teaser. What would you do if you had enough evidence to destroy your betrayers right now? Would you strike immediately or let them dig themselves deeper first? Comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the twist that changed everything. Because trust me, I wasn't done yet. The evidence I had gathered was powerful, but I knew it wasn't enough to simply expose them. I wanted them trapped with no escape, no way to twist the story back on me. So I kept playing my role. The mask of the dutiful wife fit perfectly now. I cooked Brandon's favorite meals. I asked about his day with sincere-seeming interest. I even suggested family time, laughing at his jokes as if I still adored him. My mother called more often too, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Each time she asked about the insurance payout, I gave her the same answer, not yet, Mom, but hopefully soon. I was baiting a hook, and they were swallowing it whole. Meanwhile, I spent my afternoons with Daisy, my lawyer, and Mike Torres, the private investigator. Mike was a former police detective, a man who had seen every dirty trick in the book. After reviewing my files, he looked at me with quiet astonishment. In 30 years of this work, he said, I've never seen a case this airtight. You've documented every move they've made. If this goes to trial, your husband and your mother could both face prison time. The words should have made me sad. After all, Brandon was the father of my son. My mother had given me life. But instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. Brandon grew restless. He asked about the insurance company almost daily now. Any word yet, sweetheart? His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed the urgency. These things take time, I told him with a practiced smile, but it'll be worth the wait. Every lie I told him was like twisting the knife deeper. My mother, too, was becoming impatient. Any update on the payout, dear? She asked one evening over the phone. Not yet, I replied. Well, good things come to those who wait, she said, her voice forced light. If only she knew just how true those words would be. The break came one Thursday night. Brandon claimed again that he was working late, but instead of heading to any job site, he drove to a dingy motel on the edge of town. I followed from a safe distance, my heart pounding, but steady. My mother's car was already parked there. Through the lens of Mike's telephoto camera, I captured everything: Brandon's truck, my mother's car, the timestamp on the photos. And then the final nail: Brandon and Helen walking out of room 237 together, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. They looked like lovers who had been together for years. I documented it all. Every step, every touch, every stolen glance. By the time I returned home, I wasn't even trembling anymore. I was calm, determined, ready. That night when Brandon walked in close to midnight smelling faintly of cheap perfume, I was waiting with tea and a soft smile. Long day, I asked. Exhausting, he sighed, kissing the top of my head. But we're making progress. I nodded, my face the picture of wifely devotion. Inside I was laughing. His lies had become my weapon. The next morning I called Daisy. I'm ready to file, I said firmly. Her voice was steady. Once we start, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, I told her. I want to burn this to the ground. That afternoon, I signed the papers that would freeze our accounts, void the fraudulent refinancing, and initiate divorce proceedings. Brandon would be served within 24 hours. As I set down the pen, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about freedom. And I was ready to claim it. If you've been following this far, you know this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about transformation. Tell me in the comments, do you believe revenge is enough? Or does true victory come from rebuilding your life stronger than before? And if you haven't yet joined our community, hit subscribe now. Because what happened after Brandon was served was the explosion I had been waiting for. The morning Brandon was served with divorce papers felt almost surreal. I wasn't at home when it happened. Daisy had advised me to take Tyler somewhere safe. So I dropped him off at school, kissed his cheek, and drove to a coffee shop across town. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, my hands steady, though my heart raced. At 9:47, my phone rang. Mrs. Miller, this is Officer Johnson with the Riverside Police Department. Your husband has just been served and he's not taking it well. I drew a breath, my voice calm. What do you mean, officer? He's making serious accusations, Johnson replied. He says you've been acting erratically, that you lied about insurance money. He's questioning your mental state. Even now, Brandon played the same card, painting me as unstable. I nearly laughed. Officer, I think you should know I have extensive documentation of my husband's affair with my mother, his theft of insurance funds, and multiple instances of forgery. I'm prepared to file charges. There was a pause on the line. You have evidence? I do, I said firmly, and I'm ready to show it. At the station, I laid it all out: photos of the motel meetings, audio recordings of their conversations, bank documents showing forged signatures. Officer Johnson's expression grew more grave with each file. Mrs. Miller, this isn't just infidelity. This is criminal fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. That evening, the police arrested both Brandon and my mother. The charges were clear: fraud, theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes. I should have felt broken watching the father of my son and the woman who raised me taken away in handcuffs. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Tyler and I checked into a small hotel across town. We ate pizza on the bed while cartoons flickered on the TV. For the first time in weeks, I laughed with him. When Officer Johnson called to confirm the arrests, I hung up and stared at my son. He was my reason. He was my anchor. The next day, Brandon was released on bail. My mother, too. But they were both under restraining orders. They couldn't contact me or Tyler. They couldn't come near us. For the first time in months, I slept without waking to whispers in the night. The weeks that followed were a blur of court filings, meetings with Daisy, and Tyler's quiet questions. Are you and Dad getting divorced? He asked one afternoon, his eyes too serious for an 11-year-old. Yes, sweetheart, I told him gently. But it's not your fault. None of this is. Is it because of Grandma Helen? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. My chest tightened. What do you mean? I've heard them talking sometimes, he said. When Dad thought I was asleep. They sounded like they liked each other more than family should. My son had seen what I had been too blind to face. I hugged him tightly, tears filling my eyes. You're so smart, Tyler, and you're right. But I promise you, we're going to be okay. And I meant it. For the first time, I believed it. The trial would take months. The road ahead would be hard. But as I watched my son smile at me through a mouthful of pizza, I knew we were free of their lies. And that was worth everything. Now let me ask you, if someone betrayed you so deeply, would you press charges or would you walk away just to be free? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. And stay with me by subscribing. Because in the final chapter, you'll see how justice came crashing down on them both. And how I rebuilt my life from the ashes. The trial arrived in the spring, months after the arrests. By then, Tyler and I had settled into a new rhythm, one built on honesty, quiet resilience, and the determination to never look back. We lived in a small apartment across town. It wasn't as big as our old house, but it was safe, and it was ours. I worked full-time at the library, and every evening I tucked Tyler into bed, knowing we were finally free. The courtroom was cold the day Brandon and my mother faced sentencing. The evidence against them was overwhelming: my recordings, the financial documents, the photos from the motel. Even their lawyers couldn't twist the story into something else. Brandon sat hunched, his once confident charm stripped away. When the judge read his sentence, 3 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement, he glanced at me, his eyes full of anger and something that almost looked like regret. Almost. My mother, Helen, was sentenced to 18 months for conspiracy. She stared at me across the courtroom, her gaze flat, unrecognizing, as if I had become a stranger to her. She never apologized. Neither of them did. And strangely, I didn't need them to. Their absence in my life was worth more than any apology could ever be. Financial recovery took time, but with Daisy's relentless work, we clawed back nearly all the stolen money. The house was sold, the forged refinancing voided, and Tyler's college fund was restored. For the first time, I wasn't living under Brandon's shadow or my mother's criticism. But the real victory wasn't money. It was transformation. I remember walking into a salon the day after sentencing. I want a new look, I told the stylist. Something that says I can't be messed with. When she spun me around in the chair, I hardly recognized myself. The tired woman with hollow eyes was gone. In her place stood someone strong, confident, and finally free. Tyler noticed it immediately. You look different, Mom, he said, over cheeseburgers at the diner that evening. How different, I asked. Happier, he answered, like you're not afraid anymore. And he was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. 5 years have passed since then. Tyler is 16 now, tall and sure of himself. He respects women, understands loyalty, and knows that real strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves, not from taking advantage of them. Brandon was released after serving 2.5 years. He moved out of state, never once trying to contact us. My mother finished her sentence and left for Florida. We haven't spoken since, and I doubt we ever will. People sometimes ask me if I regret what I did, if I regret pressing charges against my own husband and mother. My answer is always the same: I didn't destroy my marriage or my family. They did. I simply refused to be their victim. Now I run the library with authority. I own my own home. I've traveled to Paris, London, and Rome, sometimes with Tyler, sometimes alone. I've dated a little, but I've learned to guard my heart fiercely. If someone wants to be in my life, they must earn that place. Most importantly, I know who I am. I'm not the weak, needy woman they thought I was. I'm the woman who fought back when the world tried to break her, the woman who turned betrayal into strength. And sometimes late at night, I think back to that day behind my mother's kitchen window. The day my world shattered. The day I heard laughter meant to destroy me. They thought they were breaking me, but in truth, that was the day I began. And here's where I leave you with one last thought. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving. If you've ever faced betrayal and come out stronger, share your story in the comments. And don't leave yet. Check out the next video where we dive into another incredible story of resilience and redemption. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, because your story might just inspire the next person to rise from the ashes. When I look back now, I sometimes wonder how I ever survived those days. The betrayal, the lies, the laughter behind that kitchen window. It felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I had spent years believing I wasn't enough, that I was too fragile, too broken, too needy. My mother told me that story. Brandon reinforced it. And for a long time, I lived inside their version of who I was. But the truth, I was never weak. I was only waiting for the moment to see my own strength. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried into my pillow, afraid of what would happen to Tyler, afraid of what would happen to me. There were mornings I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. But step by step, decision by decision, I rebuilt myself. I learned that freedom doesn't come from waiting for others to value you, it comes from choosing to value yourself. I learned that betrayal can cut deep, but it also clears the path for transformation. And I learned that no matter how carefully people plot your downfall, they cannot succeed if you refuse to play their game. Today my life isn't perfect, but it is mine. Tyler is thriving, and so am I. We laugh more, we dream bigger, we live without fear, and that to me is the greatest revenge of all. So if you're listening to this holding on to your own pain or betrayal, let me whisper this truth: you are stronger than you believe. You can fight back, you can rise, and when you do, you won't just survive, you'll shine.